Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon when you're watching this webinar. Again, this is Dave Nagel, and I'm really excited to share some information and kind of continue some of the processes of developing effective quality assessments in Kearney School District. So we're going to jump right in. Most of you, I would imagine, have had a chance to meet me when we came back and had our day together the day after Labor Day, but a little bit about my background. I've been doing consulting type work for the last 12 years, been in education now coming up actually on 19. And my career was as a middle school and high school teacher and administrator, but I'm sharing throughout this webinar and the series and the time we're working together, a lot of what I'm bringing in are pieces from Larry Ainsworth's Common Formative Assessment Framework, which I use as a classroom teacher and administrator, and certainly now as a professional developer. So going to jump right in with this particular webinar that kind of focuses on and reviews effective item writing. And any quality assessment really comes down to these 3 points: purpose, evidence, inference. I have to determine what's my purpose, and then when do I have enough evidence to make an accurate inference. And I think this is where we might be challenged a little bit in some of our previous assessment work, all of us, because it's not about designing an assessment or a test or a quiz that we try to make sure the students can get enough of the items right to justify a score. We're assessing students so we know what to do next. We're assessing students so we can diagnose what their challenges are, what their learning issues are, maybe what their proficiency level is to impact ourselves. And we have to make sure that the items we're using are giving us evidence to make quality inferences. That's the key. And so this particular webinar is going to focus specifically just on, and as I mentioned, part one, aligning items to the standard and making sure they've got some of the quality elements. Come back soon with a second one that digs deeper into the distractor analysis piece, which for those of you that were with me, we did when we did the mouse activity. So I've included, I sent to Jennifer just an extra sheet in addition to the working handout we used back in September, but what I call concise, empowering, short cycle assessments. So I just use the acronym CISA that we'd use in a PLC environment. First, we determine what are the impact or the priority standards. What are the most important standards for that upcoming unit that will have the greatest impact? And so I use the term impact. Larry has used power and priority standards. Then we're going to uncover or unwrap, and that was something we did a little bit when we were together back in September, to determine the rigor level, making sure you got the concepts and skills, and then also what is the level of depth of knowledge. The next step is simply to determine what type of assessment type of items might I select, and that's based on the cognitive rigor. And if you remember, some of the groups were given the item when we did the mouse activity on paraphrasing, and we decided that it's kind of tough to do a selective response on paraphrasing because I could come up with 4 choices. Students could guess one of them, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they've gotten the right item because it would only have done it once. And so we decided that was more of a constructed response item. Finally, generating rubrics and scoring guides that provide success criteria for the teachers and students. That our scoring guides or rubrics that we provide are really aligned to what we wanted in the item and what we're really trying to collect. And so that's where we're going to push past maybe some things at times that show up on scoring guides and rubrics that either take students away from what the most important piece is or become confusing. And there's a future webinar coming up shortly on that. So we're going to dig in today with really the 2 types of items we can put on an assessment. There's selected response or constructed response. And the handout that we used back in September included some of the pieces on this. We didn't have a chance to go as deeply into it. But selected response are multiple choice, true, false, matching. Constructed response are short answer, extended response. Selected response often are times when students will select their answers from a set of choices. So if I ask somebody in the room, what color is my cell phone cover, which right now it's blue, and I said, is it blue, green, or yellow? I've given them choices to select from. Now, obviously, there's merit in matching and true, false, and a word bank. I'm going to focus our time specifically on multiple choice, not because those are the end-all be-all, but because they provide us an opportunity to dig into possible student misconceptions. When we go a little bit deeper again with selected response, we're trying to figure out not just what the right answer is, what's the best answer, and then what is one that's close. We can get more assessment literacy out of that. Certainly matching has the ability to do that. And one of the things with matching, for example, is that we want to make sure we have odd and unequal numbers of choices on both sides, so students can't eliminate by process select the right answer by process of elimination. We're not digging into, we want to make sure we can dig into why they selected something. But anyway, my point is selected response are going to be items that students choose from a given list, and certainly there's pros and cons. They're easier to score, students have the answers in front of them. It's easy to collect surface knowledge, and easier for students who might struggle with writing. But there's downsides to the selected response. You see this in the handout that I provided as well. Students can at times guess their way into thinking they know it, or guess their way to thinking they don't. They can actually guess incorrectly when they actually understand the concept. They are difficult to write, and they are harder at times to assess levels 3 and 4 of DOK, and harder to provide specific feedback unless we are more intentional with it. Constructed response is simply if I asked you, what color is my cell phone case? And I didn't give you a choice. If students construct or develop their own answers, that's a constructed response. It can be everything from a short constructed response, which might just be fill in the blank without a word bank, individual words, a sentence or a short paragraph, or showing their computation work in math. Extended response include multiple sentences or paragraphs, problem-solving processes where students have to provide an explanation to verify their answer. We'll talk later why when we get into the extended responses, that's where we'll need the scoring guide. That's where we'll need some type of rubric or guidance to not score the student for the grade, but to score the student in terms of, and having themselves score how they have met what was in that item that was obviously linked back to the standard. Some pros and cons here. They do allow a chance to go deeper into students' understanding and diagnose some misconceptions. They take more time. There's some subjectivity. No matter what, there'll be some. We'll talk about writing quality scoring guides in the next webinar that can minimize that subjectivity. And at times, there's unclear directions. But really, really all three of the cons are things that we can adjust and modify and minimize. The time to score can be a lot quicker when we have a quality scoring guide and we are empowering the students to guide their writing and their responses much earlier by clear directions. When we collaboratively score, we lose some of the subjectivity because we're equal in terms of how we're monitoring it from one classroom to another. And the tighter we are in the directions and the scoring guide, the tighter that will become for students to understand exactly what's expected of them in that response that we're asking them to give. I want to share just a little bit now on writing quality selected response items, though. We'll get into the constructed response more with the next webinar. But I'm going to show a couple examples. The first one is, it is a 7th grade standard, but I think it highlights something really important that I wanted to share. What this standard is saying, or what this item is saying, that the teachers are saying, that is assessing, determining 2 more central ideas in the text. It's not assessing, developing the course, developing their analysis, or providing a summary, but it is determining 2 or more central ideas. If we look at the answer, the question here, which of the following pairs of ideas best emphasizes the author's reasons for immigration, I want you to take a look at those 4 distractors. Which one would you say might need to be changed or adjusted? The answer is C. The reason for that is, and that just tells you the author was from San Diego, students could easily eliminate that choice because they can immediately see, well, there's not 2 choices here. We don't want to do that on our assessments. Now, that's a test-taking skill that if they're taking an external assessment, that we want to guide them on that, fine. But I don't want to discount the inferences I'm trying to make as a classroom instructor with a student who was trying to just get the answer right and eliminate a bad choice. So here's where we would have to adjust or tweak that item, which is why when we write items, we go through the process of looking at them this way. We have the chance and the opportunity to become better consumers of existing assessment items. Let's take a look at one with a 4th grade Missouri standard. Read and infer and analyze and draw conclusions to summarize and sequence the events or plot. It's not addressing the second part of that standard. Pulled this item from one of the stories one of my other clients was reading about a student or about a young boy named John. And then they had to talk about which of the following events happened in order. Was that he found out his dad was a hero, and that made him keep trying. And just as a footnote, I'm gonna fix this here. This wasn't supposed to be highlighted or bolded. I wanted to do that in the next choice, but the point I'm making here is that would not want to give an unintentional clue like that away. He kept trying and found out later that his dad was a hero, which made him proud. He found the article about his dad and decided to keep trying. He told Mr. Ament that his dad would have been proud of him. The best answer is actually A. He found out his dad was a hero and that made him keep trying. If you look at choice C, and we'll talk later about the distractor analysis, he found out his dad was a hero because he read an article. But actually, if you look at drawing conclusions to summarize and sequence of events, it wasn't that he found the article. It was that he found his dad was a hero. A is really the best choice. So a couple of points here, and we'll talk more about the distractor analysis in the next one of the subsequent webinars coming up shortly. But you can see here now all of these choices really address the standard, and they're all written in a very similar way. The best answer, of course, is A, because it was that he found out his dad was a hero, and that made him keep going, not that he read the article. And if you look at B, that would mean that he was out of order. At the very end, Mr. Ament does tell him that his dad would have been proud of him. But in terms of sequencing the events and plot, that item addresses it, and A is really the best choice. So we want to make sure that our items align with the level of rigor and what's in the unwrapped concepts and skills. I'm going to also provide some guidance here. We talked about this a little bit about back in September about ways to improve existing items or give our items a once over. So I'm going to walk through some of these. Here's an example of an incomplete question stem. This is not an effective way to write the item because when there's a break in the sentence, it causes the reader to have to stop as opposed to something like this. It's better to write the item as a full question. What did John say would make him unhappy is better than John said blank would not allow him to be happy. We want distractors close to equal in length. Now, they don't have to be an exact syllable, but when one choice is disproportionately longer than another, third graders, fifth graders, and people's taking the MCAT and the LSAT, in many studies, they'll choose that one. So I don't want that to get in the way. Now, I might be wanting to know if that's a test-taking skill my kids are applying, but then I'm missing out an opportunity to make an inference around English or math or science. So we want to have them as close as possible. And another one that I just wanted to highlight was avoiding negative question stems. Which of the following is not allowed under the Constitution? A better way to write that item is which of the following is allowed or are allowed under the Constitution. Select all that apply. And so it's better that way because if the answer choices were actually A, B, and D, and the student selects A and B, I know what they know and maybe what they're missing. But a not question really confuses the brain. It's a poor way to write an assessment item. And just because an external assessment is going to do it doesn't want to mean I want to modify that bad practice in my class. I can prepare the students for that type of item separately than when I'm creating a quality assessment. And if you remember, these assessments are what we want to use in a PLC setting. So we don't want our discussion around student learning to be impacted by something that got in the way of their understanding and prevents us from making that inference. So I hope that makes sense. There's a time and place for that, but not for some assessment tool that we're going to use and analyze. And again, in the handout, there were some more examples like this for not only multiple choice, but for matching and for true false. And what's critical is as we're using these tools to write our own assessment items, they can help us become better consumers of existing assessments that are already in place, whether ones we've written or ones at the end of chapter tests. But I caution to ever just take someone else's assessment without putting it through some filters to make sure that they have the quality. And at the same time, nobody from Houghton Mifflin was in your classroom when you were teaching and going through the instruction. So sometimes it's taking their assessments and modifying and guiding them. Maybe they do the heavy lifting for you, but most teachers don't like to be told what to do, as you shouldn't. Well, don't let someone else tell you exactly how to write your assessment. I'm providing some guidance. And if you notice, it even says under those pieces for writing effective items, they're guidelines, things to consider. As always, thank you for the time on this webinar. Please send any questions. There'll be several more coming through here shortly for the group from Kearney, and I look forward to talking with you soon. But again, if you had a question or a thought, please send any of your questions to davenagelvl+@gmail.com. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day.